Alright YouTube, Occult Literature video number 62. As always, two links in the description. First to my edition of this work on Amazon. Second to my books blog, many other materials available within the general scope of the occult and all of its subgenres. This is on the secret work of the Hermetic philosophy, which the title is a little bit confusing because it really doesn't have anything to do with Hermeticism in the sense of Hermes. But at the same time, it's a very good alchemical work. It's one of the most literal of them all. I think the only other one that I've edited that's this literal is by John Pontanus, and really that work, it was so short I had to bundle it with Trithemius and Philolethus, in essence, bundle all three together. There will be a video forthcoming about that release. It's an important one. But this work is also important because if you want the how-to, number one, it's a physical alchemical work. It's not just a bunch of philosophy. It's not a bunch of logical dialogue. It's actually, here's what you do, here's how you make the Sorcerer's Stone. If you want that and you want it in quite a literal manner, this one is for you. It's about 52 pages, so a little bit on the longer side, really, than most alchemical works. Most of them, they're under 35 pages. I'm going to read a brief passage from this so you can see quite clearly how literal it is, in opposition to those that talk about, well, increase this by degrees, and then add the red cock to the brown dragon, and then whirl it around with your wand or something like that. And they're very confusing. You know, you have to do a lot of digging through the veiled references. I mean, you can Google a lot of these terms and you'll realize what they mean, but it still gets a little bit convoluted, and there are some that people don't quite agree upon, especially with like the Trithemius sort of, ever-burning lights. That's a real doozy. Only about half of the ingredients are fairly clear. But I'm going to read a little bit from this, which is abnormal for me to do. Let the form of the furnace be round, the inward altitude of 2 feet or thereabouts, in the midst whereof an iron or brazen plate must be set of a round figure, about the thickness of a penknife's back, in a manner possessing the interior latitude of the furnace, but a little narrower than it, so it's not quite connected to the outside level of the furnace. Lest it touch the walls, it must lean upon 3 or 4 props of iron fixed to the walls, and let it be full of holes, that the heat may be more easily carried upwards by them, and between the sides of the furnace and the plate. Below the plate let there be a little door left, and another above in the walls of the furnace, that by the lower the fire may be put in. And some of this is Old English, so a little bit may be lost here and there in translation, trust me. And by the higher temperament of the heat may be sensibly perceived. At the opposite part, whereof let there be a little window of the figure of a rhomboid, fortified with glass, that the light over against it may show the colors to the eye. You're supposed to observe, when you're actually creating the Sorcerer's Stone, it's called the peacock for a reason. It's supposed to sort of amalgamate into this weird mixture that flashes weird colors. We would think of an oil slick and the rainbows in that, or of certain materials that sort of have a prismatic effect or something along those lines. So you can see in this passage it's fairly explicit. It's telling you the dimensions and the design of the actual furnace used. Now, Pontanus alludes to Artephius, and if you read those works, if you're interested in the literal side, if you actually want to work alchemy, and I can't legally condone it because you'd be working potentially with toxic metals and so forth, then this would be probably the most important of the works, and the Rosary of the Philosopher's counterpart to that in a more metaphorical sense, but more expansive. Added to this would be Pontanus' work on the philosophic fire and Artephius' secret book. Because if you don't understand the concept of what the philosophic fire is fully, and Pontanus is quite explicit and seems flabbergasted at having found the secret after years of fruitless endeavors, then you can't actually work alchemy. Now, the experiments will be a failure. Some people, of course, they talk about the alchemical fire being of absolute penultimates. And sometimes they talk about it being the warmth of sort of decomposing, composting dung. They talk about using hot ashes as an indirect source, or coals, or just regular flame of various materials. And people, of course, in these texts hundreds of years ago, have this same debate that people would even have now over which is proper for which steps of the work. Of course, you can't melt the average metal by simply putting it in a pile of cow poo or something like that. But this is a decomposed organic chemistry sort of process as well, not just inorganic. So the secret work of Hermetic philosophy is probably, if you're interested in the more physical, hands-on side of alchemy, as opposed to the philosophic, the use of metaphors for man being spiritually refined or something like that, or the talking of simply the generation of materials in what they understood to be a natural sense, or even the paranormal side of that, talking about like salamanders and elves and dwarves like guarding these underground caves and so forth. If you're interested in that, there's a lot of material available, but for the physical side, this is the penultimate work of all. Again, added to it the Book of Artephius, which I will be editing in the near future, as well as Pontanus' work, which I've compiled with 2 other shorter texts as well. So as always, link in the description to where you can purchase an edition of this work off of Amazon. Again, literal alchemy. Physical, if you're into the philosophic side, this is not philosophical. And a second link to my books blog, where there are many other alchemical texts, and I've listed them. I've tried to put a description for each one to tell you whether it's more on the physical alchemy side or more philosophical, basically in a few sentences what the content is and what it means for a person that may collect it. So hopefully that'll be of help to people. That's about all. Peace out.